Again, everyone, to Let's Get Uncomfortable. On your screen, you will see our version of a land acknowledgement. As advocates of anti-racism, we recognize the violence against First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and other Indigenous peoples, and the erasure of Indigenous cultures as a result of the colonization of these lands. We recognize the systems of violence and oppression that have dispossessed Indigenous peoples of their lands, families, well-being, and history, and denied their rights to self-determination. It is our responsibility to bring justice for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls across Turtle Island, to bring justice to the children and families whose lives were taken and traumatized throughout generations by the residential school system, the government, and other institutions. We recognize our responsibility to confront and dismantle the systems that perpetuate continued violence and oppression of Indigenous peoples today. So thank you again, everyone, for joining. Let's Get Uncomfortable, Anti-Black Racism in Travel and Tourism 1 year later. 1 year later, it's been nearly 12 months since our first event in the anti-racism series, 13 months since the murder of George Floyd at the hands of police, 13 months since Regis Korchinski-Paquette, 15 months since Breonna Taylor. Here are some more numbers for you. 181, the number of known Black people who were killed by the police as of April 2021 in the United States. 215, the number of Indigenous children's bodies found at the former Kamloops Indian Residential School mere weeks ago. 52%. In Canada, over 52% of children in foster care are Indigenous. They'll only account for less than 8% of the population of children aged 0 to 14, a sign of the continued impact residential schools have on Indigenous communities. And 94, the number of calls to action that were laid out in the 2015 Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada report, the majority of which remain unaddressed 6 years later. 73, the number of years Palestinians have been living in an apartheid state. 1 in 2, that's half of BC's residents of Asian descent who have experienced a hate incident in the past year alone. 4 members of a Muslim family who were killed in London, Ontario in an act of terror. 1 little boy who will now grow up without his sister, his mom, his dad, and his grandmother. 365, the days in a year when Black folks are Black, Muslim folks are Muslim, Asian folks are Asian, and Indigenous folks are Indigenous. We call this event Anti-Black Racism in Travel and Tourism 1 year later, because it's been a year since our first Anti-Black Racism event. But the realities that have brought us to this discussion didn't begin last summer. They have been lifelong for many people. Racism, hate, and white supremacy are very real. This continues to be glaringly evident in the news headlines that we see on a daily basis. So what are we to do as mere tourism professionals? What role can we play in being anti-racist and influencing change and progress in the world through the work that we're doing? Last year, the panelists we hosted in our LGU event spoke of a lack of diversity in tourism and marketing, a lack of representation at events and conferences, a lack of representation at all levels of major tourism organizations, gaps in hospitality and tourism education programs, the racism and microaggressions Black folks face at airports, in hotel lobbies, and in destination, and so much more. And at the same time, many tourism corporations were among those posting Black squares on Instagram and declaring their commitment to DEI initiatives. So what has changed? Or has anything changed? Here to address the question with me today, our esteemed panelist, Veranda Adkins, co-founder of Association of Black Travel Professionals, Elizabeth Buchanan, founder of Paradise Weddings, and Linda Kelly, Travel Product Specialist, Flight Center Americas. Ladies, thank you for being here today.
Hello.
Okay, let's begin. So let's discuss your individual journeys. I want to begin with a better understanding of the path that each of you traveled as it relates to representation and anti-racism in tourism. So let's start with Veranda.
Hello, everyone. Just want to say really quick thank you to LGU for putting this conversation in the forefront of everyone's minds. I definitely think it's something that we need to start discussing more. But my name is Veranda Adkins. I have been in the travel industry for about 21 years. I started out at Travel Impressions right out of college. And so I've seen a lot of things in the travel industry, just seen, a lot of different things that happened at our company. There weren't that many Black people. I don't necessarily want to say that I was ever, discriminated against while I was there at TI. It just wasn't very many Black people throughout the company. And when I started my own travel agency about 6 years ago, and I started getting out and seeing, more people at industry events and things like that, just kind of recognized that sometimes when there were these high dollar producers there weren't that many agents that look like me or minority agents, period, that may have been there. And so that's kind of, just been my journey here and just seeing everything that's been happening in the travel industry that way.
Thank you, Veranda. Liz.
Hi. Thanks to LGU for putting this event on and the series, and thanks for having me. I would say first and foremost, my journey has been a lot more personal than professional so far. That's just how it's sort of happened for me. Obviously, with the events of the past year, I started to have a lot more realizations, about the world and about how things go in our industry. And I don't like to say, but the truth is, I didn't realize a lot of the challenges, that there are in racism in our industry. And I was blind to a lot of them. And so, in discussions with some colleagues over, last summer, that kind of thing, I really started to be aware of those things. I mean, obviously it's around the world and it's, in our backyards. It's most certainly in my backyard where I live. But I really, sort of had some blinders on in terms of racism in the travel industry, because, you have this picture that travel makes you this better person and it makes you more aware and more accepting. And that's not really the case, unfortunately. So that's sort of what I've spent the past few months, like looking at and sort of learning about more.
And Liz, don't forget, you've been calling people out, which is, important because we can be inactive, but it's really good to be active, especially when you can affect some kind of thought change with your peers. So thank you. Linda. Can't hear you. Are you mute? No, you're not mute.
Take them off. It's gonna take them off. It's a little echoey, so hopefully that's okay.
Perfect. Yep, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm Linda. LGU, everybody, thank you for having me. I really appreciate this platform to speak on. So my journey, like Liz's, was also more of a personal one. To sort of understand where I'm coming from, an important detail to know is that I'm married to a white police officer. So my journey actually started when Eric Garner was murdered by the police back in 2014. And the Black Lives Matter movement sort of really coming to the national stage. Now, when that happens, there's obviously a lot of contrast between pro-police and Black Lives Matter. So I found myself in this very strange world where I decided I was going to start to talk about things that I really did not know enough about. And shortly after Eric Garner, there was 4 police officers in New York City who were targeted and shot at. And so that made me want to post something on Facebook about it. And I decided to caption it like what most people would, there has to be a better way, which I then followed by hashtag Blue Lives Matter and hashtag All Lives Matter. So at this point, I really had no idea what I was actually saying. And it was actually a friend of mine who came forward and was like, hey, you need to really consider what you've said here. And I didn't really hear her at the time, even though she was another white woman who was coming to me being like, you should really reevaluate what you're saying. It wasn't until I really started to dive into it. So I started to look at the history of things. I honestly thought I was going to look into the history and prove her wrong. And it turned out that I was the one that was completely wrong. And so from there, I learned that while I thought I was supporting my family, I was actually oppressing a whole group of people. And obviously I did not want to be part of that. So fortunately for me, my family has been very supportive throughout all of this. So we kind of took it on, all of us learning and moving forward and trying to figure out where we fit in this grand scheme of things. So then flash forward to this past May, or sorry, the May before, May 2020, when the murder of George Floyd happened by the hands of police again. We actually went as a family to the Black Lives Matter protest in Barrie. My husband had a sign that identified him as a police officer. So you can imagine he got a little bit of backlash for that. But it was just so important for him and I to just show the community that this is where we stood now, that we wanted to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And it was probably about a month after that, I think it was Condé Nast, don't quote me on that, but somebody had put together an article on how there was a huge lack of diversity in the travel industry and how it needed to be addressed. And it was at that point where I had already done all this preliminary work because of my personal life that I was like, you know what? It's time. It's time we take this to the travel industry and start making changes there. And that's how I got here.
Thank you, Linda. So Veranda, back to you. Let's talk about ABTP. There are always people who do not believe the professional BIPOC organizations are necessary and then often try to argue that they're segregational or racist. What is the Association of Black Travel Professionals? Why is it necessary? And what was the last straw or catalyst that prompted you and your co-founders to create this organization?
Yeah, so we received an email actually when we first started from someone, an agent, saying, oh, you guys are just creating more diversity and more, distractions in the industry. This isn't really necessary. And I think all of our individual whys, there's 3 co-founders of ABTP, and we all had like an individual why. And what's crazy is we didn't really know each other. We kind of just had the same, like we knew each other through the other one, if that makes sense. And we were having these feelings at the same time, and we kind of came on. And I think for me personally, one of mine was I saw that there was an African-American travel conference that was being held, I think last summer, or it was coming or something. And we looked at the, who was behind the company. And it was definitely targeting just African-American travel agency owners and travel advisors. And everyone in the company was white. There was no diversity, no representation. And it's like, how can this panel of people really know what it is that Black travel advisors need if they don't have anybody in their leadership that's telling them what we need? Right. And so the 3 of us, like I said, we all each had our own individual whys, but it was just in us talking that we came together and was like, hey, we really need to put something together. And it's not meant to definitely divide the industry at all. If anything, it's meant to say, hey, if you're, somebody like Liz or Linda, of course, great supporters of the organization, to say, hey, we need to really start thinking about, there's not any Black travel professionals when we're in these rooms. We need to figure out how we can include them. So it's not just open to Black travel professionals, it's open to everyone as well too, to help kind of fill in some of those gaps.
And that's great. And I think that's a good message to put out there, because oftentimes we are in these organizations and we're attacked because we're excluding someone. And that's never the case, or the mission. Really, it's to help lift and build with those who want to support. So thank you for that. We talked about allyship, activism, and education, but we tend not to hear the stories of those who are truly active. So in your experience, Liz and Linda, how is being racist being reflected in your everyday practice as travel professionals? Let's start with Linda.
I mean, for me, my team has been drastically shrunk over the last year. We've gone from 32 to 6. It's just kind of what happened with COVID. So I actually kind of see that as a very fortunate thing looking back now, because I have an extremely supportive team. We're constantly talking about how we can improve just our messages to the Flight Center employees. So one of the things we've really been focusing on is sort of coming up with lists of sustainable travel, identifying Indigenous owned and operated tour companies within Canada so that we can obviously give back to that community. We want to try and promote the companies and the tour operators who have actually shown growth through all of this. So like I said, our resources have shrunk quite a bit with the workforce, but it's given us a really good groundwork to focus on these things because it's only a small group of people. As far as implementing it so far, it's been a little hard because we are definitely still in the regrowth period, but the fact that we are having these conversations is something that I've never had in my Flight Center career, and I've been with Flight Center for 15 years. So while they are baby steps and while we still need to prove ourselves in the long run, I'm just really happy with where we've at least started.
Yeah, and since we've talked to Mpuga a few calls ago, we were really shocked to see that a large company on a world scale like that had actually put forth initiatives before this even really became a bigger issue to companies across the globe. Flight Center had already really taken the steps to build a diversity and inclusion office. So I'm glad that it's trickled down to your position in the company. That's awesome. Liz, how has your experience changed?
Well, I would say I'm more at the beginning of my sort of professional journey here. Not in my professional career, but last year I kind of had I guess, kick in the pants from a video a friend posted, and it was about being unafraid to, like you were saying, call people out and say the hard things and have the hard conversations. And something that I've found really difficult for myself professionally over the years is to be that person publicly. While I'm comfortable being that person privately, or with my friends, with my social circles, when I'm in person with people, I had fears about being that person online. How is this going to affect my business? Especially again, where I'm from.
Tell everybody where you're from, Liz, because not everybody knows.
Alberta. So that, a lot of things you've heard about Alberta are true, unfortunately. So, there was some fear there, and I kind of let go of that fear last year. But at the same time, I sort of mentally checked out from the industry for probably about 6 months. I was still here and I was still, canceling stuff and rescheduling stuff, but I wasn't fully in it. I think a lot of us went through something similar, with COVID happening, that sort of thing. And I found myself with more time to be engaged in social activism here and politics here. And I really kind of threw myself into that. And it's been a bit of a challenge again. And now that, I've kind of thrown myself back into the industry and, everything's looking up and things are ready to get back to sort of normal in the industry, I'm like, all right, this is an area where I can affect some change. So how are we going to go about this? So I'm sort of ready now to make those plans.
That's awesome. That's great to hear. And it's always good to hear that we're all on the upturn. It's been a very long time. Last summer, following George Floyd's murder and the spread of the Black Lives Matter movement across the globe, we saw many travel companies post statements about DEI and make verbal commitments to change. So let's talk about the follow through. What have you all seen actually change, big or small? Linda, let's start with you.
So, I mean, you kind of alluded to this because you've already spoken to Mpuga about it, but we had, like, Flight Centre has formed a diversity committee, which I never really thought was going to happen, but it has. We even have our very own diversity ambassador. They just implemented a paid diversity day. So any Flight Centre employee can choose what day they would like to take off for their own reasons, which is fantastic. We have had some formal diversity training and policies introduced. We've had some anti-racism trainings. We have a new company vision. Like, Flight Centre really was on the attack when it came to this. They really wanted to start making changes. Probably the biggest place where you've seen it is in our marketing campaigns. Like, we have way more inclusive marketing campaigns, which is fantastic because that's customer facing, which means that our customers can actually see that changes are happening. It'll just really be interesting to see what happens next, I guess is the best way to say it. Like, now that things are on the upturn, how do we make it better? Where do we go from here? How do we implement more? So obviously the biggest thing that people are going to be looking at is recruitment, but we haven't been hiring, so we can't really test those waters yet. But when we start to hire again, that will really be when we can see if all of this has come to fruition, which I think is really important. But like I said, there's many plans in the works. It was just one of those things where we didn't want to come across as like having a bunch of boxes to tick and then moving on. So with that, obviously making such a large change, it does take time.
Yeah, change management and accountability. And from what I've seen and heard from Mpuga and yourself, it looks like a lot is actually being grounded and, you know, growing into something that's gone through different departments and senior leadership. So that's all amazing and a great story. And hopefully one will hear more in other companies. Liz, what's going on your end?
Honestly, I'll be perfectly honest. I haven't seen a lot of change personally. I think, you know, a lot of, you know, the bigger players were happy to do their black square and release their statements, and then, you know, back to COVID panic and how do we stay afloat? And now that things are looking up again, how does that look for us? I think this is just my opinion, but I just think it was okay. That's done now. Let's move on and get back to what we do and what we know we're good at, and how do we recover from that. And I find it a little disappointing that, you know, I mean, obviously everybody's had a challenging time over the past year, but I think, you know, in so many ways we had such an opportunity with COVID. A lot of other industries and just personal lives in government, et cetera. You know, there have been a lot of opportunities to make some positive change with, you know, the new unique environment we're in. And I think that a lot of that has been missed.
Yeah, it really has. That's why Flight Centre has been a shock to me. And I'm so excited to see everything still changing. I think in my opinion, I've seen things change in LinkedIn. That's like the one that sticks out for me. For some reason, I see more on a professional, personal development perspective. People are attending events in their own free time to make sure they understand what workplace change looks like, and to understand what other companies are doing. I have not yet really seen it reflect outwards towards consumers or those of us who are selling to customers. Like, really a big change in what we saw before. Probably on the lines of what Linda alluded to with marketing. That I have seen. I've seen a lot of change in destinations, who's in them, how the levels of marketing may have changed, where you might have only seen certain destinations as luxury and only to a certain client. I have seen a few seep through, which was also an issue because of classism, obviously tied into racism, but not as much. Veranda, what about you?
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with you a lot, Shalene. And one of the questions that we've been asking when we've been meeting with different suppliers at ABTP is, we hear that you have these DEI, you know, diversity initiatives and things like that within the company, but exactly who are you talking to again to get the input of what's needed to completely be diverse if your organization isn't diverse to start with. And so that's one of the ways that ABTP is hoping to be a resource to some of these companies, because we have that network of Black travel professionals to say, hey, look, this is what we need. This is what we want, so definitely seen some effort, but obviously we still have a long way to go.
Well, and I know none of us thought it was going to change in a year, but
right.
We were hopeful we'd see something. How do you think COVID has impacted the industry's progress? Now, I think we all know the answer to this, but it is a little different for each of you. So it's allowed space for some progress, but it's given people an excuse, right? So I don't have the money. We don't have the staff. Do you think there's enough space for a little bit of change? Linda, you've seen it, but Veranda, what do you think?
I think it is. It's one of the funny things that I tell people about COVID. Of course, travel just ceased, and once we canceled all the people we could cancel, it was like, okay, what do we do with our time? But for the three of us at ABTP, it was great to have that downtime, because it actually allowed us to form this organization that is much needed in the industry. So I think it's, if you wanted to take the opportunity to be diverse and to do things, you could have taken that as a time. But then, like you said, a lot of people have just used it as an excuse, like, oh, I was just out of it. I couldn't, deal with it. So, I think COVID has been great to kind of slow us down a little bit and show us where this need kind of exists in the industry.
Yeah, I know it's given me an opportunity to realign myself with partners. Really see from like BDMs or tour operators who is in support of the same initiatives and drive and changes I am. Like it was time, kind of like Liz, I'm sure you're going to speak to, as we talked about this a bit. I rebranded. So as I rebranded, I took it as an opportunity to shake the dust off, essentially. Like, I love to sell this, but if this is what I believe, this is no longer a fit. Liz, what have you been doing?
Yeah, sort of similar. I actually did a rebrand the year prior, so that wasn't a road that I was going down, but similar, sort of take some time to think about, this is the direction I want to go. If these are my values, my business is an extension of myself, and my business has to reflect my values. And I think that's one of the most valuable lessons that I learned through everything is, like I said previously, I'd been scared to be this presence and be this person in a professional way. But I think it's more the opposite now, because truly, when you have a business, it's your baby, it's an extension of yourself. And if you're not aligning your values, in your professional life too, that's a ticket to an unfulfilling professional life, right? And we need to be mindful of, like you're saying, those partners that, their values are aligning with yours. And I think that's, where things will head in the future more so. So starting to be mindful of these things now and, starting to head in that direction is going to be a positive for us, for clients, and for the larger companies, the tour operators.
Yeah, I some of the changes I made, I remember when I first started out about, 7 years ago, someone told me to rebrand, for instance, my Instagram to my name. So they told me, take off Latitude Concierge Travels and make it at Shalene Dudley. She said, because people want to book with you, and you can tell them you own Latitude. As the years have changed and gone by, I went back to just Latitude, and it was faceless, and it was, weddings, romance, baby moons, blah, blah, blah. When I rebranded, I married the two. This is the first time my face has been like blatantly on my website. Like, if you have a problem with me, then you will figure that out from the beginning, because I have had Zoom calls with people who are shocked, kind of like they used to be shocked when I was at a bridal show, like, oh, you own it? So now it's like, oh, you're Shalene. So now we kind of get less of that because people know who they're going to talk to. And if they had a problem, I probably never had anything scheduled, right? So I'm proud of who I am and that my company is, led by a Black female. We're Black woman owned. And I think it's important to now be able to show that that's okay for other people who still have LinkedIn's and they're minorities and they're not showing their faces, right? They're scared that the opportunities will be pushed past them because of what they look like. And I couldn't continue to, support that without doing it myself. I mean, I'm on my LinkedIn, but again, my business, it could have been anybody named Shalene Dudley. Like there is another Shalene Dudley who does not look like me. So it could have very well been, oh, I found her on Facebook. This is her. And it made me uncomfortable at first because then I was like, okay, what picture? What should my hair look like? And then I thought, you know what, forget it. That's the point. Like get uncomfortable, be who you are, be what you sell. And so that's what I did. So on the lines of being uncomfortable, Linda, you know a little bit about that?
Slightly.
Just a little. How do you move through the discomfort? Like how do you get through the day? What can you tell other tourism professionals who are hesitant to commit to the work out of fear from what their peers will say about them and what their employers will think?
Yes, I actually thought about this one for a little bit. So thank God we got the questions early. And I think probably two of my biggest takeaways from this would definitely be, it's okay to be wrong. This is a learning process. You are going to get it wrong. And the second thing is just get out of your existing bubble. So people become so consumed by who they surround themselves with that sometimes you don't even realize that there's opportunities there until you kind of branch out. So I have a lot of people ask me like, how do I start? And I'm like, well, start following people that don't look like you on social media accounts. That's an excellent way to start. Like start listening to what's happening around you. Read recommended books, watch recommended movies, like reach out to friends and family that you have that are already in some kind of anti-racism work. Use your resources. Do you know what I mean? And don't be afraid to ask questions. Like I've asked a million questions along the way. Sometimes I feel like they're really dumb questions, but it's important in the learning process that you ask the questions. And I mean, sometimes it is, oh my God, can I say this? Like when I word it like this, is this okay? Like you need to have sounding boards and you need to find your sounding boards. And then honestly, once you have those, it becomes a lot easier to do the work. Most importantly, I always tell people to take mental breaks. You need it for your mental health. A lot of the stuff that you're learning and how to talk to people and sometimes the backlash from it, like you need to give yourself time to rest from that as well, because sometimes it can be too much and just overloaded. I've also learned to set boundaries. That was something I never did before. So often when I'm talking to people, I let them know what I'm talking about and I let them know that hate speech is not welcomed. So if it comes, I cut them off. But I think it's so important that people actually talk about that. You know what I mean? Like we all just kind of sit in a room and people say things and we just kind of take it. But we have to remember that we, as the person who's talking about this, is fully within our own realm to say, this is my space. These are my boundaries. This is what we're talking about. The type of stuff that you're saying is not welcome here. And I guess, again, I keep saying this, remember, change doesn't happen overnight. It literally doesn't. It took years to get me where I am today. So if you've screwed up in the past, forgive yourself. Get over whatever shame it is that you're feeling. And trust me, there's a lot of shame because you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I said that. It's like when you go to a bar and you get a little drunk and you remember the next morning you were dancing on tables. Exact same feeling. You're like, oh, how did I say that? How did I think that? But it's like, it's okay as long as you move forward from that. You can't stay where you are. Don't stay stagnant. Move forward. And I guess the most important thing is that making any kind of effort to do better is what you should be focusing on. It is going to be baby steps. It's not going to be this huge dramatic change that happens like that. And you kind of just have to be willing to be there for the process.
Thank you, Linda. You seem very comfortable.
I wrote this down a million times so that I didn't screw it up.
Thank you for sharing, because honestly, your perspective, you hear far and few between, or people don't want to admit that they are going through what you're going through. So just revealing this story in this space, somebody may retell it or somebody in here is feeling it. And, you know, there's a commonality there that makes them feel a little more comfortable. So thank you for that. How do we keep moving forward, ladies? What actions can tourism professionals take to influence progress in anti-racism work in our own jobs, workplaces, and the industry overall? I'm going to start, and this is probably the only thing I'm really going to harp on. Last year, I called out ACTA, and I really was disappointed in the response. And sorry, Veranda, ACTA is the Association of Canadian Travel.
Okay.
It's the same as your ASTA.
Gotcha.
I was disappointed that an organization that represents us had, you know, a great list of their goals and mission that completely paralleled what we're going through now, but they made no moves or even insinuated that they supported what was happening. And not that I needed the support personally or professionally for LGU, just in general. Like, this is an important issue regardless of if it affects you directly. I mean, it affects everybody, whether you see it or not. And I think one of you talked about blinders. It's just like when someone plays that punch buggy game with you. You've never seen one all day. And then when you're playing that game, you see about 10 little cards. So now that I'm making it apparent to you that it's an issue and something we all want to discuss, you assume that there would be some kind of acknowledgement, an attempt. And really what happened is, you know, it was lip service, and then, you know, I guess maybe it was too much. So the message got watered down, whitewashed, whatever terminology you want, and really has disappeared. So that's what I've seen happen. Have any of you seen any progress? I guess, Liz, you're with a host. Have you seen it there? Linda, we know what you've seen at Flight Center. Veranda, forming ABTP. So I'll start back to Liz.
I'm working on it. I think we're going to be really heading in the right direction. One thing that I do know about the host agency that I'm with is they do have the same values as me. And I think a lot of people, just especially in Canada, I mean, a lot of us are Canadian travel professionals here. Veranda, you're in the States, and there might be some more on the call, but in Canada, we're scared to we're scared to rock the boat. Mm-hmm. You know, we like to sit around and say sorry and whatever. I think more and more people are getting over that. And in my view, you know, excuse me, I sort of see all of us, you know, on this call that are engaging in this conversation, you know, we're going to be the drivers of that change. And I think, you know, as we are having these conversations, and we're having them publicly, and we're putting media stuff out there, I think that over time, and it's again not going to happen overnight, but I think we started to see it already, you know, clients and consumers are going to start to see that. And I genuinely believe that that's where the change will really happen, because as we've seen a lot over the past year, over the past few years, and over however long, but really over the past year, people really making more conscious purchases and ethical purchases and purchases that align with their values. And travel is no different than where you're buying your cosmetics. It's no different than where you're buying your clothes or your food. That's where the change is going to happen. You know, when consumers start to demand that they're working with companies that align with their values, everybody's going to have to follow along, right?
Yeah. I've seen more people ask me specifically, and they always kind of preface it like, okay, so you recommended this place for us to get married. My family is all BIPOC or Black, brown, Asian. Are they going to be okay with us being there? And I'm so excited to hear people ask that and not skirt around it. You should feel comfortable. You're spending all of this money. You should go to a property or a destination that is welcoming of you. not just the dollars you've spent. And you should be able to feel comfortable while you're there. And, you know, I love that conversation. I personally have not, I guess, recommended anything that wouldn't have, but it's good to hear it, right? It's the same conversation I have with my 2S LGBTQ clients, right? They want to go to the Caribbean and they ask, like, is this destination safe? It's the same conversation. We should all be able to have it. It shouldn't just be about your sexual orientation, your preference. It should also be about you. Like, aside from that, what you look like, what your family looks like, and what you'd like to do on your trip. So that's been exciting. And I'm hoping that there'll be more of it. Veranda, what about you?
As far as what actions we can take, I know that when we were first forming ABTP, we had a conversation with one of the major hotel chains, and we kind of just told them, you know, we've seen your rewards programs, we've seen your award ceremonies, and it's not a lot of representation of diverse groups in this. And the response was, well, our awards are based on sales. And I was like, yeah, I get that your awards are based on sales, but what are you doing to let everybody know that your awards are based on sales and hitting all of the groups of people that you need to be hitting? Because obviously when I look at your stage, you're missing somebody. And even though it's based on sales, like there's some type of disconnect. And I still don't think, and it was kind of a joke with us after that call, like, okay, he's probably, like, and Linda said this earlier, he's probably an all lives matters person. And it was one of those things where it's like, yeah, it's a little bit different though, because there are, like, we definitely know we need to sell. We definitely know what the work is that we need to do to be able to, you know, attain these different levels of success within the industry. But there's also a lot of barriers because there's a lot of stuff that you don't know because you're not in the circle with a lot of these other high producers. I mean, and I think that's one of the ways that Shalene and I actually became friends. We were at an industry event, and I think we were the only two people in the room at that time. So it was like, okay, let me go talk to her. So, because it's kind of, you know, familiar, but at the same time, we know we need to branch out and kind of get there, but we needed to be inviting. We needed to be welcoming. So I think those are some of the actions that people that are in those positions can take to say, hey, you know what, let me make sure, you know, I am being invited. And I am, you know, because sometimes you can go to an event and it's like, yep, don't know her. And I'm sure this is with everybody, but don't know her, not talking to her. But for us, it seems a little bit different too, because not only is it, I don't know her personally, but now it's that cultural thing too. So I think that's one of the things that just going forward, we all need to be a little bit more conscious of, and just making sure, you know, one of the things that we like to say at ABTP, if you're sitting in a room and there's no Black people in the room or there's no diversity, that should be one of the first questions on the agenda. Like, why is it only us in this room? So I think that's one of the actions that we can take, you know, moving forward.
And Linda.
So, I mean, it's pretty apparent that Flight Center's framework has been laid out. So now it's the follow through. It's making sure that we obviously keep on top of all of this and that we implement what we said we were going to implement and all of that stuff. It's the momentum. It's like after we saw all those black squares, like I remember seeing not a month later, people being like, guys, Black lives still matter. So even when it's not like popular in the news, we have to remember that this is the process. We have to keep working at it. I mean, personally, I'm pretty excited about the path that I'm going down, where I get to look into all of this fun, sustainable and responsible travel, because then I can help all of the Flight Center crew sell the sustainable and responsible travel. I like the company has never focused on that stuff before. So it's really nice to have it be a focus. And just keeping the conversations going. Like we just honestly can't let the conversations run stale. We got to keep reminding people what's going on, keep checking in, keep making sure that things are moving forward like they're supposed to. I mean, the future of the diversity committee, I'm pretty excited about to see where it goes. I have lots of ideas, so hopefully they're ready for me. But like I was saying, the work really begins with what's happening here. So like the fact that everybody has signed up for this and wanted to hear us talk, that's a huge step in itself. Like, even if you don't know how to talk to your teams yet, the fact that people are engaging in conversations like this is really what's going to help move all of this forward. And the fact that, like Veranda said, we have to be conscious of it. Like, this is a constant conscious state. We have to be aware of what's going on and how to make it better on the daily. I have an Indigenous creator that I go to whenever I need to talk things out. And he said something to me that's really stuck with me that I'm going to share with all of you. He said that we're all breaking intergenerational issues, but it's what we do today that's important. So regardless of what has happened, as long as we are moving forward today, that's what we need to focus on.
Thank you for that. Thanks for sharing, all three of you. Thank you. I think we're at the end of the panelist portion, but ladies in the shadows, do we have any questions from the Q&A?
Yeah, so we had somebody who wanted to know, what does everyone think about, and these are kind of brand specific, but there's a lot of questions about diversity in marketing happening right now and surfacing. So what does everybody think about Royal Caribbean's brand having predominantly Black family imagery for their ads? Both Celebrity and RCI have instigated this, according to the questioner, within the past 5 to 6 months. Can we talk about, I guess, that performative, all of a sudden bringing things to the table now, and like, what are the thoughts?
I'm not going to speak on that. I don't sell cruises. And I haven't seen the ad, so I won't comment.
I was going to say the same. I don't either. And I was like, they're what now?
Right. That's a big change. Is it?
And I will say I haven't necessarily seen the ads, but I will say that Royal Caribbean was one of the first big national suppliers that we got, or international suppliers that we got on as a sponsor of ABTV.
Oh, that's good.
So I do believe that they are, really trying to put the efforts forward just in the conversations that we've had with them. And like I said, they were one of the first ones to sign on when we contacted them.
See, glad I didn't say anything. That's amazing. I didn't know what I was talking about, and that's why I had no comment. That's amazing news, because I remember in the beginning of this, while we watched like BTA was going, the media route, a lot of travel agents started with the cruise lines, because I've only been on like maybe a handful of cruises in my life, but you always see a diverse crowd of people on a cruise. And it was very shocking to see the opposite in the marketing. It was never anybody other than a blonde family on anything. So that's good. And Veranda, thank you for the insight on that. That's good to know. So maybe they're going from, one end of each spectrum, and hopefully they'll meet in the middle and start hiring people that look different than what's typically there and outside of the call center. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Brittany, is there anything else?
Yes. Okay. So what can travel media and organizations like the Wellness Tourism Association do to be more anti-racist? I see events and content that almost exclusively have white speakers or the same white travel pros, and it just seems out of touch.
It's funny. I've seen a few of those emails, and I think the same thing that's happened in every other facet we've touched. If we call it out and provide names of people who are great fits, then there has to be at least some acknowledgement that they've been given an opportunity to do better the next time. It is hard though, if you don't have the right bubble to find those people. So you may notice it, which is obviously a great thing, that this has got to change. But who do you know in wellness, or who do you know that's selling it, or what BDM do you know can help so that they can open the doors and pull other people in, right? We have to get one foot in the door so that you can then pull more sources. Because if they're only going to go to the same people all the time, then you're never going to see a change. So that's the part where it's on us to, when we see these things, to ask the questions. And sometimes it's just literally that people don't know anyone, but if you know someone, recommend them. I think that's the best thing we can all do for each other in all of these spaces. Anybody else have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was gonna say keeping it solution focused is usually helpful. Like you were saying, suggest people. Don't just say you're not doing this right. Like give them constructive criticism that they can actually work with to improve.
Right. I've seen that on some panels. I think Maria and I have seen some panels that needed a little bit of um, diversity period just because of what the discussions were about. And, you know, we've all tried our best to be solution oriented in the approach. That was the perfect phrase, Linda.
And that's been one of the things that we've been able to provide people with at ABTP, because we have had several sources reach out to us to say, hey, I'm looking for an African American travel professional who was an expat. Can you help me find somebody I need to write an article on or something like that? So that's actually one of our roles too, is to kind of be a resource. Like, hey, if you just don't know where to go, this organization is here. Let's see if they can at least try to help us.
Right. And you've vetted the people who are members. So there's that, right? Instead of doing a random call out, who knows them?
Exactly.
And that's why your organization is here. We needed that. Anybody else? Linda, Liz?
No, that's perfect. Yeah. Just, you know, try to approach kindly.
Yeah. Some people, again, even though
You know, not everyone is
don't know.
necessarily doing anything intent, which I think is, you know, important for us all to be mindful of. You know, sometimes people just need that, like, oh, oops, didn't realize. Okay, well, let's work on it, right?
Change management.
You have to give them the opportunity, and they do with it.
Yeah. Thank you. Brittany, is there any more?
Yes, so I've got one that says, I'm curious about your thoughts around how to best better diversify your marketing without simply creating targets around it. And so what they mean is, you know, if they want half of their marketing to show non-white backgrounds, is having a target a good thing, or does that undermine the goal of diversity?
I don't know. I guess when I look at what I'm pushing now, I make sure, or I'm making sure, because I'm not done, right? Again, it's a journey to change it. It's also a little bit more effort to find what I'd like to market. It's not now just everybody's got all these images, just go push them. I've tried to make a better effort to find same-sex couples. I've tried to find older couples. I've tried to find people in destinations where the roles are reversed. It was kind of funny to try to find a butler that wasn't Black, just to have a little bit of change. It took time, but that's what I'd like to see. So it's not a quota though, like a number. I'm like, I want 5 images of this and 10 of this. It's really being thoughtful when I see things, even when I'm not searching for it on purpose, to save the image. Like, this is a really great image. This is a great yoga image, and the girls aren't sticks. Like, these are well-rounded people. I like this. Here is a Black woman swimming without a swim cap, and she doesn't have braids. Like, there's all these things. There's a family. It's 2 men and a little boy. Like, these are images that people are producing, or maybe they were always there. And again, over the last year and a half, people finally pushed them forward, but it's something, I guess, that's underlying in my thoughts. And so when I find them, I try to save them and use them. I don't know what you ladies are doing. If maybe there's a push or an initiative in some form or fashion to find the right imagery.
I don't actually get to source any of the marketing stuff, but I can speak to what I have seen with our marketing, which is, like I've already said, they definitely have diversified like the images that we're seeing. And it's not just, you know, emphasizing Black people. It also, like, I've seen some Asian, I've seen multiple different types of colors. And like, it's just one of those things where they've really worked at branching out and sort of showcasing the wide variety of clients that may want to take that trip. I've found it extremely refreshing, actually.
It is good to see more. It shocks me though, still. I'm not gonna lie. I see, like, I go on bestbuy.ca and I'm like, wow, this whole page is BIPOC. This is a lot, but I like it. I'll take it. Veranda and Liz, anything for that one?
No, I think it's great to kind of see the images. I know, just sharing a little bit, I said at ABTP, we all had our own whys for doing stuff. And that was one of Shantae's reasonings with her whys. She had asked a supplier for some images, like, by any chance, do you have any images for your property that have Black people in it? And she was sent the images, but was told, like, hey, I need you to be very careful with how you use these, maybe not put them out publicly. And of course, this was all pre-COVID, pre-George Floyd. So she, kind of was like, what? You gave me images, but you want me to be careful with how I'm using them? So something's, wrong here. So even though that's just like a little tiny thing, I think in the major overall scheme of things, it's a huge thing that now, those images are there, and it's like, hey, please use them now. So yeah.
That is. I found some images in people's vaults. They give you their media valet, and you're like, scrolling. You're like, ah!
Yep.
I'm using these. I'm saving them. I'm using them for everything. Brittany, do you have anything else in there?
We had somebody who wanted to know, is there a resource list that that anyone can suggest of organizations or individuals that are solutions focused in Canada? So in terms of resources that you go to help with your education in the tourism realm.
I need to find, we talked about this, and I think we posted a bunch of those orgs when we did the RTO9 event. If we can get that person's contact info, I can try to dig those back up. Or you can email me, whoever that was.
Yeah, that sounds great. We also had a question from somebody who is just starting to kind of dig into, I think, that idea of understanding diversity in tourism and all the work that is needing to be done. And they wanted to know, how do you reconcile, when you dig deeply into it, how do you reconcile the spectrum between, greater diversity and inclusion and progressiveness in tourism and, the ultimate like colonialist roots of tourism, selling tourism versus, aligning with where tourism comes from and how you're promoting that while you're selling that.
I've taken some time to research different destinations that I haven't sold previously, but in the research now, it's not just the properties, it's the history of the country, what activities are, activities aren't just tourist related, like what things do you celebrate during the calendar year? What is a good time to travel dependent on those things, not just, is it rainy season? Is it hurricane season? Like there's more thought to what I'm doing. I don't know what you guys might be doing. That's kind of what I'm looking at.
No, definitely. Like I've said, we're trying to pinpoint which companies we want to promote more now that we have more of that information at our fingertips. A lot of it is, this is uncharted territory. Like people, obviously people were thinking about this, but it wasn't us. And now we are. So we're kind of starting from scratch, and it's building that library so that when people, want these answers, we have a list to give to them.
Yes. Thanks. I don't know if that helped answer it. I think we answered it.
Also had a question when it comes to seeing these beautiful all white panels for conferences that keep happening despite promises to diversify better. What are some of the approaches that you take to address them? I had gotten advice once that was really great. It was like writing to the organizers, but then also suggesting some other Black, Indigenous, or people of color experts who might be included, just to not just, when we talk about being solutions oriented. Are there any other things that might that you would suggest when addressing something like this?
Veranda, you may see that more from your side.
I would just think too, like Brittany said, that suggestion of a list of people, who you would like to see, or maybe if there's some, if you've heard somebody else speak before, or someone is really passionate about a certain topic, maybe you can suggest to the organizer, like, hey, I know this person, and I think that would be a really great addition to your, to your event. And that could be a way to kind of get them in there, because, you know, sometimes it's like people said, I mean, just going back to Linda and her story, when she posted Blue Lives Matter, I don't think it was definitely a thing like, you know, it's one of those things where you kind of protect your home. So her husband was a blue life, you know, and so it wasn't done intentionally. And I don't think sometimes people do it intentionally. It's just what has been done over and over so many times that nobody's thinking about it until somebody actually says it to them.
Right. I think it's important now that we really want to see it to take advantage when we see those call to speaker emails, because they have been coming out. I think I just saw one for, I think it was Travel Weekly. They were asking for speakers. And there's the opportunity, because they're still planning, instead of when we see the panels announced, then you're, you know, being performative. They can't, well, not they can't change, but they probably won't change the schedule. Or I think I've seen people then have breakout sessions with more representation. But again, the overall conference is not representative of, you know, who's attending. So I think if we just kind of take that extra conscious effort to maybe forward those to other people and suggest, like if you have a foot in the door somehow, to suggest like, hey, I was a part of this before, maybe you would like to contact this person to be a part. I think that's a really good step. And hopefully more and more of these conferences will send out those call for speakers, because that's the opportunity to start from the beginning.
I also think this is a really good place for we as white people to perhaps step forward and be the ones to say things. Because I think that often it's the same voices that are coming forward and saying like, hey, you need to fix this. But we see it, we just need to actually vocalize what we're seeing now. We need to reinforce the change.
Allyship. Brittany, is there anything else? Because we are at what, 5:36.
There is. We had a question for Veranda specifically. What are your plans for Canada? How can Canadian travel pros work with you and support you?
So right now, I think our only Canadian member is Miss Shalene Dudley. So, and it's actually something that we told her that we want to speak to her about, just because, just from my personal conversations with Shalene, the way you guys work in Canada is totally different than what we have to do here in the US. So that is something that's on our radar, to try to get with her and just kind of see what, you know, if there's any credentials or anything like that that we need before we can start advertising to Canadian agents. But that is definitely on our list to start working in that arena.
I'm excited.
Another question for Veranda, you're so popular. You referred to this conversation with a hotelier who clearly didn't get it. So when we come across barriers, how do you suggest we move forward? And what are the next steps when you come up against resistance?
So, you know, it's funny. I haven't let that supplier off the hook. You know, I'm not one of those people that just like, oh, you told me no, and, you know, okay, bye, I won't talk to you anymore. I've actually been sending him biweekly emails about what we've been doing at ABTP, just talking about like my personal sales with his company, you know, just things like that. And I think that's one of the things, is kind of like you have to be persistent. I've always, you know, I've always kind of believed in, you don't take no from somebody who can't give you a yes answer. But in this case, I believe this person can give me a yes answer. They just haven't gotten the feel yet to want to give me a yes answer. And so I think it's just being persistent. And I think when people see that, because I think even with our organization as a whole, a lot of people were hesitant to, one, sign on to be members, or then two, even with the suppliers, to sign on, because they didn't know if we were just like a Facebook group or if it was going to fall apart. So we're asking them to invest in us. They wanted to make sure we were going to invest in them back. And so I think just persistency is the key. And, you know, everybody's not always at a space where they can give you that yes answer right now. But if you keep working on them and do it in a respectful manner, I think you can, you know, kind of meet in the middle somewhere so people can understand each other's point of view.
That's great. Way to be persistent.
Thanks, Veranda. apart from yourselves, do any of you have any other travel professionals who are active in their anti-racism work that you would recommend we follow?
Travel professionals. Not a lot of Canadians that I follow. I think we're all really good at reposting each other's. Well, Liz, correct me if I'm wrong. I think we did a whole lot of that last year. Maria, the same. We all look at different sources, so we've been reposting and sharing. So I would definitely say Maria, and I wish I could type, but I've got stuff in front of me. To put her IG up. She's been amazing. Liz had been super active, but I think that she stopped on Facebook for a while. It was getting exhausting, I'm sure. Anybody else you guys can think of?
I feel like there's many names. I just can't.
Yeah,
Right.
I can't think of right now.
Whoever's on this call that I should have mentioned.
I know, like on the US side, but I mean, really is a company that's trying to be international, Black travel and tourism professionals. So I've reached out and working with somebody there, and obviously it's kind of like Veranda's situation where they're grounding themselves in the US. And you've got the founder all the way up to, what department is that, Veranda? It was like Department of, I don't remember. There's like a tourism hand of the government that she's sitting on a panel of. So they're trying to make changes there. And, we're considering trying to do some stuff here. So I would definitely look at that, and that's BTT. So they're on Instagram and Facebook. And then in that group, you will find other people who repost their own events. Very similar to LGU's events, sometimes focus on specific niches of travel. So there's usually things about adventure travel. I've seen things about European escorted tours focused on BIPOC. I've seen some things in the Canadian pages about Indigenous travel and trying to boost that. And I think there are some people that we're going to be talking to as LGU about that as well. So I think I'd start with those few things, but literally once you start typing in some of this stuff on Facebook or Instagram, it all floods in. Like there are so many organizations that talk about allyship or tourism and race, especially on IG. Any more, Brittany?
I think that's all we've got for now. Yeah,
Ladies, thank you so much for being here. I think
sorry, I had one more. Sorry, it got lost in the shuffle. I did. If there's one thing that you want us who are on this call to walk away with, what would it be?
Start small, but start. That's my advice. You're always going to find a reason to push it off. So whatever that hiccup is, just jump right over it and just start.
Anything, Veranda?
I agree definitely with what Linda says. I think one of the things, I have a daughter in college, and her friend group is a very diverse friend group. She goes to a predominantly white institution here in Alabama. We live in Alabama, so University of Alabama. But her friend group is very diverse. And one of the things that I admire about her friend group is that they say, the race thing doesn't really matter to them. It's like, this is my friend. They treat me nice. I like hanging out with them. And they kind of, make light of some of the situations. Like, that's your problem. Like, that's your generation's type problem. We don't necessarily have that problem. And I just wish that, a lot of us could kind of take on that instead of worrying about, oh, this is what happened, because she's not living that kind of life right now. I'm sure, she's a Black woman, so of course it's going to come up at some point in her stage, but right now with her friend group, it doesn't matter, and they're, from all different ethnicities. So I think that's just one of the things we just have to start realizing, that there's more. It's such a cliche, but there's so much more that makes us the same than there is that makes us different. And I think once we start realizing that, it will help, and it'll go a long way.
That's great. Liz?
I guess sort of just an extension of what Linda said, you know, start, but don't be afraid to start. And don't be afraid, you know, in this journey that you're gonna misstep or do the wrong thing, or, you know, that sort of thing. I mean, you know, this is again a cliche, but we say it often when we're talking about anti-racism. There's no finish line, right? There's a start, but there's no end. This is a lifetime journey, and you know, you got to start sometimes. So go into it with an open heart and don't be scared of it, because you know, you're going to attract the things to you that, you know, are going to align with what you're doing and what your values are. You know, and you're going to attract a lot more good than you are bad in this journey.
Mine is just listen. I think that it's very easy now to see multiple events posted by multiple organizations, and most of them are free or very nominal, and the perspectives are different. I know the titles may sound the same, and you may see one or two people who are the same, but I think it's really good to listen to different people's voices. I mean, that's part of the reason why we have so many problems now with everything we're dealing with. We're not willing to listen. Even if it means that you're cleaning the kitchen while the webinar is on, it's just the fact that you are trying to listen and hear one new thing every day about what's going on, what people are facing, and how we can make things better. So that would be what I'd leave us with. And I think that's it. And if it's not, it's gonna be, because it's 5:46. And people are like, I'm out of here. I know you're not going to the bar though, because we still can't really do that here unless you're American and everything is open. So everybody else, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your support. Thank you, Maria and Terry and Brittany and Impuga and Tolu, who's not here, but here in spirit. Our group is growing. If anybody would like to help, would like to volunteer, would like to make suggestions, we're here and we're open. Just to close out, I want everyone to really remember the 215, the 181, the 52%, and that one little boy, and really try to help make things different for tomorrow. Thank you. Have a good night.